Hello and welcome to Making Sense of It All. I'm your host, Asyakostanyan. In today's episode, we'll delve into the real-world applications of the Endogenous Policy Credibility Model, or ENDOCRED. This model helps central banks navigate the delicate balance between inflation, stabilization, and economic growth. We'll discuss lessons learned from the past and the challenges central banks face in maintaining credibility. Let's explore how models like ENDOCRED are reshaping the future of monetary policy. Why credibility matters. Central banks have long understood that credibility is critical for achieving macroeconomic stability. Losing credibility can lead to persistent inflation, volatile economic conditions, and higher unemployment. Rebuilding it, as history shows, is often a slow and painful process. Take the Bank of Israel's experience in the early 2000s. Faced with a weakening economy, the central bank lowered interest rates, triggering a depreciation of the shekel and an inflation spike to 7%. To regain control, it raised rates sharply, but this policy shift caused volatility and prolonged economic slack. Only through a forward-looking, credibility-focused framework did the Bank of Israel manage to restore stability. The lesson here? Credibility is hard-won but essential for effective policy. The role of analytical models. Models like ENDOCRED are transformative because they integrate credibility as an evolving factor, rather than a static assumption. This dynamic approach helps central banks design strategies that avoid the costly extremes of high or low inflation regimes. A real-world example of having one of these frameworks is the Reserve Bank of India. As highlighted in Chapter 11 of Advancing the Frontiers of Monetary Policy, the Reserve Bank of India uses dual quarterly projection models. One is an endogenous, non-linear model that captures a broader spectrum of economic risks, while the other is a linear model for quantitative forecasting. This combination has strengthened the RBI's ability to anticipate economic shocks, simulate alternative scenarios, and refine its policy decisions. This approach also highlights the risks of relying solely on simpler linear models, which may overlook complexities and lead to policy missteps. Having an appropriate framework is critical, as the Reserve Bank of New Zealand's experience demonstrates the costs of inadequate modeling. Before adopting the Forecasting and Policy Analysis System, FPAS, in 1998, the RBNZ relied on rigid and narrow approaches that failed to manage trade-offs effectively. This rigidity resulted in economic inefficiencies and a lack of coherence in policy communication. The introduction of FPAS marked a turning point, allowing the RBNZ to integrate empirical evidence with judgment. The improved framework reduced self-inflicted economic costs and enabled the central bank to better balance short-term economic shocks with long-term objectives. After all, models like ENDOCRED and FPAS serve two key purposes for central banks. First, they act as thinking devices, enabling policymakers to conceptualize how economies evolve under different scenarios and varying levels of credibility. Second, they function as projection tools, helping central banks organize their forecasting processes and integrate data-driven insights with expert judgment. This dual role is vital for anchoring inflation expectations, enhancing policy coherence, and managing trade-offs effectively. The shift from ad hoc decision-making to structured, model-based frameworks represents a broader movement toward more flexible and reliable monetary policy strategies. Avoiding dark corners. Olivier Blanchard's concept of dark corners, scenarios where economies become trapped in prolonged inflation or deflation cycles, is particularly relevant today. ENDOCRED addresses these challenges by incorporating the convexity of the Phillips curve, showing how poorly anchored expectations can lead to prolonged slack or necessitate severe tightening. The Reserve Bank of New Zealand's early experience illustrates how inadequate frameworks can push an economy into these dark corners. Before adopting FPAS, the RBNZ relied heavily on the exchange rate channel to control inflation, a strategy that imposed significant economic costs. As described by Hayworth, Kostanyan, and Laxton, 2020, this rigid approach resulted in substantial monetary tightening, a sharp appreciation of the New Zealand dollar, and severe damage to the tradable goods sector, particularly for farmers. This inefficiency was compared to trying to brush your teeth through your ear, a method that might achieve the goal but with unnecessary pain and inefficiency. To avoid these dark corners, DeBell and Laxton, 1997, emphasized the importance of addressing the convexity of the Phillips curve in monetary policy design. Policymakers who fail to stabilize the business cycle risk inducing a higher natural rate of unemployment in their economies. They emphasize establishing a buffer zone in monetary policy, which can act as a safeguard against significant overheating or prolonged slack. This buffer zone enables central banks to mitigate inflationary pressures without resorting to severe recessions, maintaining a stable balance between inflation control and economic growth. Challenges of the future. The pandemic era brought new challenges. As opposed to beliefs of transitory inflationary shocks, years of above-target inflation have weakened credibility in many countries, complicating the task of stabilizing inflation expectations. ENDOCRED offers a way forward by providing a framework for preemptive action. Consider the importance of anchoring expectations in the long term. The UK's success in the late 1990s highlights how a forward-looking, transparent approach can rapidly establish credibility. Within months of gaining independence, the Bank of England anchored inflation expectations around its target. Models like ENDOCRED can help central banks emulate such successes by emphasizing the importance of clear communication, dynamic policy adjustment, and forward-looking strategies. Credibility-focused models like ENDOCRED are not just theoretical tools, they're essential for navigating real-world complexities. They help central banks learn from past mistakes, adapt to future challenges, and maintain public trust. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the evolving landscape of monetary policy. If you found today's discussion insightful, please share it with your colleagues and leave a review. I'm Ani Asoyan, and this has been Making Sense of It All. Until next time.